is a terrible drawing, I know. This is Cornwall, Wales, okay, Scotland, okay, and England, okay. This whole area was tribal Ireland. This whole area was inhabited by different tribes. They had no name collectively for all the people. They used separate tribes for everyone. They spoke separate languages. These languages were related. And later, as a group, they came to be called Celtic. Okay. These people, when the Romans came in, this is the people, the cultural group they belonged to. And the people as a group, not these, the Romans never went there, but these people as a group were called Britons. And you can see where the name Britain, Great Britain, comes from today. But later, when the Roman Empire fell, in 410 AD, Gothic tribes plundered Rome. That was a big shock to Rome because they felt that nobody could do that. But they had been defeated in war outside, far away, but this was their capital. When that happened, Rome withdrew its forces from here. They had put a dike, a earthen wall here and there, a stone wall, Hadrian's wall, and they defended these against the tribes from outside. But when when Rome itself was plundered, they withdrew their troops and they told the people, "You are on your own." Now, who was there? Many Roman soldiers had married local girls and they had continued to live there. Kind of like an American married a local girl here and continued to live here. Okay, so it's Stokes, right? Okay, that's what he did. So I know people in India who have joined the military, and they have been stationed in Northeast India or Kashmir. Soldiers go to new places where they are stationed and they meet a local girl there and they marry, and then after they leave the army, they stay there. Same thing, okay? So the retirement policy of the Roman government was to give land. There was no pension. You got land, which your own army had conquered, and now you stayed there. It was a smart idea of the Roman government. They had militarily trained men living on the land they had already conquered, which could make it easier to defend. But as these people get old and fat, okay, they just are not as so fit soldiers as they used to be. So when the army left, these people said, "We are not able to defend against the Scots coming down and attacking, and the Irish coming in by sea and raiding. So we will hire some people from elsewhere to come here and fight for us." Mercenary soldiers. So they hired Danes, and they hired people who were also Jutes, Angles, Saxons, people from this section, and they came across over here and would be the hired soldiers. Every winter they were supposed to go back because people didn't fight in the winter. It was the sea was too stormy. They didn't attack in the winter time. They attacked when the weather was good. Finally, these people came and said, "Look, why are we going back every year and coming back? You need us every year. we will just stay and camp here. So they were given some places along here to continue to fight. When these people saw that more resistance was against them, they increased their numbers. So these people had to hire more, and the war was escalating. And then finally, these people camped along here said, why do we have to obey them anymore? We are stronger than they are. So they began to fight against the Britons. And they were stronger. They pushed the Britons back to eventually, until the Britons were occupying Cornwall, Wales. They had been pushed back into that area. And the Angles and Saxons and Danes and Jutes, the Jutes had a little section over here. A lot of this was Saxons and a lot of this was Angles. To this day, this section is called East Anglia, the Eastern Angles. And this part is called Sussex and Essex, which means the southern and eastern Saxons. This area, Wessex, but Wessex was divided and lost that name, Wessex, the Western Saxons. You may ask, how about the Northern Saxons? There were no Northern Saxons. Northern part was the Angles. So the name England and the language name English comes from the Angles. Okay. And when you hear about Anglo-Saxon culture, that's the Angles and Saxons, people who came and stayed and conquered this area. The Scotland people were originally, Scot, this word, was originally a northern tribe from here, and they had emigrated from Northern Ireland to Western Scotland. Before they did that, the northern people likewise were divided among many tribes, did not have one name for all of them. But the Romans who fought them called them Picts, P-I-C-T-S. Picts meant people who paint themselves. Now, have you ever seen the movie Braveheart? Anyone? Okay. It's not worth it. It's many inaccuracies. But Braveheart is supposed to be about a guy from the 1100s. But he goes into battle. He is painting his face. They did not do that at this time, but they did 1,000 years before, when the Romans were fighting them. Then these people, some of these migrated up here. There was a man named Columba who traveled. He was a Roman Catholic priest, or not Roman Catholic, he was a Christian priest, but he moved up there among his own people who had migrated before and started churches, and from that he reached northern Scotland and Christian message. These people slowly began to change their religion and also some of their customs. The lowland Scots were reached from this side, and Christianity reached them from along here. There was an island that with a monastery, and they reached from here that direction. Now, this language, if you talk about the language Anglo-Saxon, if you try to read it now, it's basically impossible. The English language has changed very, very much. Okay. If you study English, usually the first thing they try to teach you is a poem called Beowulf. Okay. Now this story is a story that comes from this area. Not surprising. That's where the language comes from. So the story originally takes place in here. I think 3 movies have been made of this story. There is one called Beowulf and Grendel. It has both names in it, and that is the one most accurate to the looking to see what the original story, what really happened. Okay. Then, after you study, when you study Beowulf, there's often there is another writer who you will see his name coming up, and in the development of the English language. This man, Chaucer, he was a government servant, and he was sent here and there on diplomatic missions, but he also liked to write, and he wrote some poetry and different things. The most important work that he wrote is called the Canterbury Tales. Now, what are the Canterbury Tales? Canterbury is right in here. It's a town name. And Canterbury is where a man named Augustine, there are two famous people named Augustine. This is the second one. Augustine, who was a missionary from Rome, and he came here, and after the Angles and Saxons conquered this area, and the Britons had been pushed back, the Britons were Christians. The Angles and Saxons were worshipping the gods of their forefathers from here. When they came here, the Pope later sent Augustine here to tell them about Jesus Christ. So there was what we call re-Christianization of Britain. They reconvert this area to Jesus Christ. So now Canterbury is this place. Now during the war and history of England, there was a King Henry II who he ruled all of England, plus half of France, plus he, during his time, went over at the invitation of one Irish king and conquered part of Ireland. So that this area around Dublin, he conquered that, plus this. He had a huge kingdom. Henry II was unhappy with the Roman Catholic Church in his territory, and he was wanting the priests to be governed by the civil law, whereas the church was saying the priests will be governed by the church law. So this was the dispute. Finally, he had arranged the assassination of the bishop. The people turned against him because he did this. So then he did penance. He subjected himself, his own idea, to a public whipping on his bare back, at the place where he had killed. He did not personally kill, but he arranged the killing of the bishop. So Canterbury became a pilgrimage place. People would go there, they would make a visit there, just like people go anywhere for pilgrimage. So the Canterbury Tales is people who are on the road walking along, traveling to Canterbury for pilgrimage. So Chaucer writes this story, and he says, we'll have all these different people telling stories as they walk along day after day on their way to Canterbury. So now Chaucer's idea was not original. There was an Italian guy who had written a book of people walking along, telling stories, collection of stories, short stories put together in this way. And Chaucer got that idea and thought he would do an English language one. But of course Chaucer's English is not easy to read. So Chaucer wrote this. Chaucer is a person who tended to make the English language respectable for other writers. Okay, it is a very important role. Some languages have no literature. Nobody thinks that is it a learned language. Nobody wants to write literature in that language. They want to write in another, language which has a literature tradition. So, in the Italian language, for example, Dante wrote a book, 3 books called The Divine Comedy, an English title, the Divine Commedia in Italian. But he wrote in Italian, not in Latin. And he was the one who tended to make people feel that an Italian language could be a language of Greek literature. They did not have to write in Latin. So like that, Chaucer is the one who made English a language where people felt, hey, we can write really cool stuff in English. It doesn't have to be in Latin. So Chaucer is a bedrock figure. But Chaucer is writing quite a long time ago. When you talk Beowulf, you may be talking, I don't remember exactly, but it's, maybe, I'm not talking about the date of the event, I'm talking about the date of the writing, okay? Maybe 900, and Chaucer's more like 1300 or 1400, as the language slowly changes. Now, of course, you have another major figure, the person who is many people consider to be the greatest writer in the history of the world is who? The greatest writer ever to live and write literature of any kind. There's one magic word. Shakespeare. Okay, so Shakespeare comes along, and Shakespeare lives in the town here, somewhere there, called Stratford-on-Avon. Avon is a river name, so Stratford-on-Avon means Stratford by the side of the Avon River. And his dad is a local alderman, mayor of the town. And we don't know very much about Shakespeare, except that when he was a very young man, 18 I think, he married a girl who was older than he was, 21, 22, 23. And in their culture, at that time, if that happened, it basically meant that he had got the girl pregnant and he had to marry her. What we call in America a shotgun wedding. Shotgun? Okay. Shotgun wedding means the wedding takes place and the father of the girl is sitting there on the front seat with his shotgun. You will marry my daughter, okay? So that's a shotgun wedding. So that's Shakespeare apparently has a shotgun wedding because he marries a girl who's older than him, which is very strange for that time. And their child is born about 6 months later. Okay. So Shakespeare is there. We do not really know what happened in the next part of Shakespeare's life. Some people say he was a country schoolmaster, rural school teacher in a country town. Other people say he went and studied under some nobleman somewhere. There's debate as to what. These are called the lost years because we don't really know what he did at that time. But they used to have teams of drama players who would come around from town to town. Now usually these people would go to an inn. They would come. An inn usually had it has a gate here, okay, for the stage, horse-drawn coaches, okay, to come. Before there were buses, these were the buses. And an inn has the rooms around here, the rooms that people stay in, okay. And on the outside, there is a balcony, a walkway. So you can come up the stairway and you can go to your room, okay? 2 floors. And in there, somewhere there will be a dining place down. So the coach